Okay, well, with a bright sunshiny day, it feels like a good time to get started. Although it is bright and sunny here, it is not warm outside. So I am joining today from just across the street from Towson University in Baltimore, Maryland. I'd love to know where you all are joining from. Feel free to drop that in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and ask my fellow panelists today to go ahead and turn their cameras and mics on, and we'll get started here. So welcome back for all of you that have attended some of the other Ivy webinars that we've hosted this year, and welcome to those of you that are new to Ivy webinars. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us in 2024 as well as we kind of continue this series. Today, we are very lucky to have our partners at Florida Atlantic University joining us. So I'll go ahead and start with introducing myself. I am Sharon Harrison, the Vice President of Marketing here at Ivy.ai. And then I'll go ahead and hand it to Falan to go ahead and start the FAU introductions.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Falan Robertson. I'm the Assistant Director here at the Financial Aid Office. I handle the customer service team as well as public relations.
And we'll go ahead and hand off to Charles then.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Thompson. I'm the Director of IT for the Division of Student Affairs here at FAU, and which includes, housing and student union and campus recreation and student health and all those departments that are usually in student health. And my role through this was one more of an administrator who has been the implementer of Ivy across the number of departments that we've used it.
Wonderful. And William, your turn.
All right. Hello. My name is William Gilbert. I am the call center manager here at FAU. Basically, I handle everything call related to the undergrad office here. So inbound calls, outbound, as well as the chat service that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I know Falan is just kind of rubbing it in for all of us with her beautiful background, which we're just going to assume is what it looks like out of her office window, and we'll all be a little bit jealous. So we'll get underway here and really use this time that we have together as productively as possible. As you can gather from the title of the webinar, we're here today to talk about strategic partnerships, scaling solutions for administrative and student needs. Super important to think about it from both perspectives. A quick little agenda to give some structure to our conversation. So first, and kind of thinking chronologically, right? Makes sense. Let's start at the beginning. So we're going to talk about the vendor selection process and then move through adapting to change. Again, thinking about it from the administrative and the student perspective. Always good to take a step back and look at the lessons learned. You all attending today have the benefit of learning from what FAU has encountered, what challenges and what successes they have faced, and then rolling that hopefully into your own best practices. And then we'll look ahead to the future and again, touch on those best practices. Now, we hope to have time at the end of this conversation for some Q&A. You all pre-submitted questions in the registration process, so we'll touch on some of those. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. Whatever we don't get to address live today, we'll address offline in our follow-up communication. So one way or the other, you're going to get an answer. All right, so let's take a stab at that vendor selection process. Now, like I said, I've had the pleasure of working with FAU for the last just about 4 years, Charles, I think it was. And so it was Charles and I that worked very closely together as FAU navigated their vendor consideration process. So Charles, I'll toss this to you first. I'll put you on the spot first. Thinking back all those years ago when we were, a little less gray, a little less wrinkled, can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the beginning stages? Like what was the spark that brought you to start looking into AI chatbot solutions for FAU? Hold on, Charles. I know you're saying something good, but you're on mute and we don't want to miss it.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I think the desire for a chatbot really grew out of the need to improve our ability to respond to student and parent questions. It really started with financial aid and admissions. Both of those areas had call centers. but the call centers were really struggling to keep up with, with the demand of calls. Everyone sort of got frustrated because it would take a really long time for people to get the phone answered because the queues would back up and people would then hang up and then they'd call back. And then by the time we got somebody, you're dealing with, irate people because they've been on hold. And, so we really needed a solution that would help us to answer calls better and to alleviate some of that stress. Kind of the other concern, I think, at the time was that, our offices are only open from, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and kind of the student availability schedule is exactly the opposite. It's kind of like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So which means that when the students really had their questions and were really focusing on this, we couldn't answer them. We weren't here for them. So I wanted something that could really sort of address the students' needs when they needed it, and something that could help keep us, keep up with the volume, and that would make it easier for students and their parents.
Yeah, that parent perspective is another one to kind of think about, isn't it? Faland and William, I'm wondering if in your experience pre-chatbot, and William, certainly in your experience with, call centers, that volume component, right? How do you keep up with that? How do you deal then with the frustrated student or parent when they do finally get on the line and you have to take time to potentially de-escalate the situation, right? Do you find that was kind of the norm? And then secondarily, the types of questions that you were getting, was it information that already existed? And Faland, this is probably more for you, William. I know you're newer to the institution, but was that information that was readily available on the website, but they were just not taking advantage of existing resources?
Correct. Not necessarily taking advantage of the resources, but with Ivy being implemented, where we're able now to assist having some team members on Ivy and some on the phone calls, we're able to handle the volume and, of course, de-escalate the situation where now the whole time is not the same, the queue time is not the same, and students are actually staying on the phone lines for us to be able to answer their questions.
And have you consistently tracked, I know that, we run into this a lot in our conversations across institutions. It's the tracking of the data, right? It sounds like you have a very good handle on your hold times, your call volume. Is that all kind of part and parcel with what was being considered as you were looking at vendors and you're thinking about like, well, we'd love to see, and Charles, you alluded to this, right? That hold time drop or the value of the call increase, right? Because we can take longer to talk to that prospect or that student.
Yes, definitely. We've already seen the numbers. We've already seen the change from having a huger call volume now lessened because of Ivy now being available to our students. So yeah, look at the stats on a weekly basis, and it definitely shows that having Ivy has definitely improved our call wait times, even escalation process, because people are now less upset. I've even advocate this system here to different departments to speak to admissions or different departments to let them know like, hey, Ivy's there to help out with the queue time. This is something that you may be looking into because it definitely has assisted financial aid office.
And William, let's talk about staffing for a second. Not just necessarily the number of staff, but the happiness of the staff. As much as you can speak to potentially pre-Ivy or other places where you have worked with call center staff without the support of a chatbot, I would imagine it's just a little bit of a grind to get those frustrated, students, parents on the other end of the line. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So in previous experiences, I've never had an opportunity to work with this type of technology. So every type of customer and parent that we got was really at a level 100, and having to de-escalate and bring it down was a challenge for the supervisor or the manager, depending on who was on duty. What I have noticed in my time being here at Florida Atlantic is that the first month that I was here, we really weren't utilizing Ivy appropriately in the call center. So my chats were much higher, and I had a longer time to have an associate answer the chats. after implementing it and playing around with the system over the last 2 months, though, I've seen that become a huge drop. So we're answering questions quicker. The bot is answering questions more effectively. And in doing so, the type of calls that I've gotten as far as escalation is concerned has drastically increased. I don't even think I have anything. And then for those callers that do get through to us, it's really frustration based off of the fact that the system couldn't answer the question because they needed a human to explain what they were missing as far as their application is concerned or what the next steps are. But I have seen a nice change or decrease as far as the irate, upset customers. And I believe that Ivy is definitely benefiting our call center phenomenally.
That's great. I mean, we love to hear that you're getting less irate calls, right? I think that's everybody's worst nightmare is I'm answering the phone and I'm not sure what's going to be on the other end of it. So if you've been on webinars with us before, you know that I tend to ask this. I like to know kind of what the attendees are feeling. So for those of you out in the audience that have dealt with frustrated students and parents, high volumes of inquiries, right? Just kind of that like day-to-day grind, throw an emoji in the chat that's an indicator like of your frustration level, right? So maybe it's just a thumbs up and you're pretty laid back and chill, or maybe it's, your hair's on fire. But we'd love to see and kind of gauge, where y'all are at with that. Now, to kind of bring it back into, while you all are emojiing out there, if I can create a verb out of that, to bring it back to that consideration process. And Charles, if we can kind of narrow the funnel, because obviously you were looking at the gamut of vendors, and I would be remiss if I didn't kind of bring it back into Ivy and ask you, what were those deciding factors? What were the parts of Ivy that you were like, yes, this will work for both the individual departments and also kind of support the institution as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in the beginning of this whole process, once we figured out what we wanted, we formed a committee to look at all these, a number of factors, because we said, what's important to us? Multiculturalism. We're in South Florida, which is one of the most, actually FAU is the highest diversity university of the state universities in Florida, in South Florida, and the state of Florida. So, we want something that can handle Spanish. We want Creole, it's really important. We wanted something that would also tie in well with, social media platforms and the ability to be, kind of personalized. So we can have that little owl on the page, when people are looking for us. We wanted something that's kind of future-based, so we can do some text, send some text messages and do some text chats with them. We wanted something that would be easy to implement as well. Some of the places that we were looking at, you really had to do all of the questions and answers yourself. Since Ivy had the web crawl and gives you something to start with that you can almost go day one. That was a helpful bit. One actually. A big player in this was financial aid, and one of the vendors that we're looking at had a whole compendium already of financial aid answers, and so we were looking very closely at them. But in the big picture, everyone else would have suffered. So we actually didn't go with that one, even though it would have been great for financial aid. We went with one that would that we could work with. And that would be, again, the web crawling was really big for us. We like the live agent transfer, to be able to have a live person on there as well as, and kind of seamlessly go in some ways between the chatbot and the live agent. Of course, reporting and metrics are important. And so we compared and contrasted about, I think it was 3 or 4 different vendors at the time, 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere in there. And when we compared all that, we went with Ivy because it was something that we felt we could grow into. Because you guys were blossoming, and there was and it offered a lot of scalability for the university. We'd start small and then kind of grow as time grew and our needs grew.
Mm. I want to underscore a point that you made that is incredibly germane to this whole conversation, right? You highlighted that, yes, there is a vendor that is highly specialized in financial aid. I think we all probably know who that is. But does that limit your potential to scale and support more areas of the institution? So if you're thinking holistically about the student needs across the entire student journey, but also on the administrative side, right? Let's not just support one area. Let's think about how to create a unified experience. So I know that that'll come up later, but I really appreciate you surfacing that at this point. So we'll continue on here and we'll talk about that again, that adaptation, that evolution, because Charles, you kind of teed this up perfectly when you think about like the changing needs of administration, of students. We hear a lot about, and you guys have, if you've attended more of these, have heard me talk about. It's great to think about meeting students where they are, but you also have to be thinking about where they're going to be, right? Otherwise, you're going to be in a constant game of catch up. You're not going to be meeting the expectations and the needs, and you're going to be behind, and it's going to potentially be a negative experience. So we've heard a little bit about, now that you have the chatbot and you've gone through implementation, what some of the outcomes have been. But I really want to break it down and think about what have been some of the the obstacles over these last 4 years. We arrived at implementation right as COVID, kind of took over the world. More recently, we had, ChatGPT launch. And so COVID drove innovation. COVID drove need-based innovation on both the student and the administrative side. ChatGPT brought about a different level of education about what AI can deliver. So it drove student expectation and also maybe some reservations on the administrative side, but certainly a larger dialogue about AI. And now, we have Philando on here from the financial aid team who can probably very accurately speak to, the outcomes from FAFSA simplification and the sort of instability around the FAFSA process right now. So those are all things that I would imagine drive shifting expectations and an adaptation on your end, as well as obviously technologically on ours. So Philando, I'll toss this one to you and let you dig into that.
All right, thank you. Yes, this certainly has evolved the level of immediate assistance we can provide to our students and their parents. With the bot being available to get the most updated information to students right at their fingertips via the website, this leads to a quicker resolution. For instance, the quick turnaround time, we have a better average with surveys, response directly from students and parents. Lastly, with unexpected circumstances like COVID-19, even now with the current changes with the FAFSA, we needed a technology system that can provide 24/7 support, and the bot provides that efficiently for us.
Something I want to highlight about your financial aid deployment specifically, it's something that we refer to on the Ivy team quite frequently, is that you lead with live chat. So during hours when you have staff available, you have, we've configured the bot so that it's live agent led and defaults to the bot if there's no staff available, which is a great kind of use of it. We know that you get a lot of inquiries outside of business hours, so you have that support as well. I'm wondering if that was an initial kind of use of the bot that you anticipated, right? You went into implementation knowing that you wanted that, or was that more reactionary in realizing kind of what your traffic and engagement with the bot looked like?
I would say knowing, because we actually do advertise, we do market it in different events that we have on campus, that we are available. We are live agents available to students. Not only do you need to call us, we are available via the chat. So we do promote it left and right for our students and parents to just jump on board. We are available with our regular office hours between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then of course, Fridays, Monday through Friday. So we do encourage to actually reach out and respond to students when they're on the live chat. Sure, there could be more difficult questions that they want to reach out to and speak to someone specifically or a counselor. They can definitely contact our phone number. But yes, our push is to always reach out to the Ivy chat. We're just as available via the phone. We're the same as Ivy. and we can answer your questions.
Now, Charles, you referenced, you know, that you oversee in your role a number of, or work with a number of different areas. And we've seen a slow expansion of Ivy across campus to bring in admissions, new student orientation, right, housing, and to kind of add these other areas. But they're not all using the bot in the same way, right? And so that configurability, can you talk a little bit about that and how the use cases in different areas are going to drive different use of the bot, staffing is going to be different, and maybe how that's modified over time based on those changing needs?
Yeah, I think the um, financial aid went into the live agent first idea from the very beginning, because I think they knew that a lot of their students are going to have questions that the bot's going to have a tougher time answering, because a lot of them are going to be, I think, more so about their own situations. And I think and just giving them boilerplate from the website might not be as satisfying. So I think financial aid went into that from the beginning, saying, hey, this is a great feature. Let's use it this way pretty much from the beginning. And they also have staff that they could, well, I don't know if they have staff that they could do that easily with. I think a lot of departments have been less able to, they've come in there wanting the bot to alleviate some of the phone support, but we don't really have the money or the ability to hire enough staff to kind of keep up with someone to stay at the computer all the time. So I do think that over time, we have realized in some that, for instance, even in admissions, started it pretty much kind of bot only, and we'd look at inbox 0 when we need to, but we didn't really have someone do the live agent. And then we realized that, okay, well, this is really, it's kind of necessary, because it was stumping it a lot. And you found the types of questions, when you look back at the type of questions, sometimes you can see, oh, there are questions here that they're not gonna, that the bot's not gonna be able to answer sufficiently, and then students will just call at that point. So, which means that the bot really hasn't done you very much good. So by itself, so let's do a live agent. So we do have now, William has someone that is a live agent during the day in the admissions office. So I think what's great about it is that you've got a lot of options, and you can start it depending on the type of data, the type of calls you have that come in, and how you want to address them. And do you think is it mostly students that have sort of the quick questions that they're just kind of lazy and it could be found on the website, so it shows them that, or if there are things that are a little bit more in depth, that the first question is going to lead to the second question, is going to lead to the third question, and if that is the type of situation, the type of information that you have, then the live agent is a great option.
William, I want to kind of follow on from what Charles was sharing, because you mentioned that in the 3 or 4 months since you joined FAU, that you have already identified, like, hey, there are things that we're not doing with the bot that we could be doing in order to offer better support and better intervention. Will you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So, working with Falond, I was able to see how the financial aid side is utilizing this tool, and it was completely different from how the call center here in undergrad admissions is utilizing it. I think that it was really an eye-opening experience, because I was able to see some of their benefits and see how we can implement it here. The whole concept of having an agent live was, pretty much an eye-opening experience to me. I was under the impression that it had to be bot first, and then when it got stumped, it went to a live agent. Being that we can actually switch it up, and having so much flexibility with this particular system is going to be beneficial all around. So with having my agent in place, I'm able to now actually farm some of the harder questions to her so that she's able to handle it accordingly. I'm stuck with this impression of thinking that, this system is like your baby. You have to mold it, you have to grow it and cater to it and make sure that you're showing it and developing it into a way that is going to align with what you're trying to have it do. Being that there is so much flexibility with this system here, you have to get creative with it. You know, if you think that you have a situation where you're going to be stumped as a user of this system, I encourage you to play with it. Play with your sandbox, get into the system and see what is working, what's not working, and continue to network. If you have other departments that are utilizing the system, network with them to see what's working for them and what's not. Don't be afraid to just pull the trigger on something in order to see if it's going to work for your institution and not going to work for your institution.
I love that. Use the sandbox. Don't be afraid to try new things, kind of A/B test them. I really like that sort of understanding that it's not a static resource, right? It's dynamic, it's iterative. It's learning from the student engagement, but it's also learning from, you know, your intervention. All right, well, let's move on to the next topic. Let's talk about, again, we've already kind of touched on some of this and teed it up, some of those lessons learned. So I like to think about successes and challenges, or sometimes it's successes and failures, through the lens of both provide an opportunity to improve, right? There is an outcome, positive or negative, and we can learn from that. So I would like to take a bite of the good stuff first and hear about what you can kind of, any one of the three of you, please share anything that you kind of identify right away as a positive impact, as a success for FAU.
Yes, I can take that. I would say one of the most significant successes achieved is receiving students' feedback from surveys and making necessary changes. With Ivy, I'm able to see the different impact from data and the different categories within the data. For instance, every week I review our team stats from average response time, average chat duration, the brain intelligence, cluster hot topics analysis, and my favorite, which is surveys. For example, from just the survey aspect, students can let us know their real-time reaction of a service that they just received, and it makes me the happiest to understand that what they're feeling at the moment. Students can let us know basically they were serviced properly, whether they let us know whether they're a parent or not. We receive statements from feedback simply from the support was swift, complete, quick, informative, helpful, knowledgeable, very responsive, easy experience, great direction, timely resolution, and just plain out phenomenal. So this really ensures us we are moving in the right direction. And on the other hand, from the surveys, we were also able to adjust certain settings to make the overall experience more pleasurable, like the turnaround time on responses, adding more live agents to be available during a specific time frame, adjusting our contact form to asking the question if we are chatting with a parent or if we're chatting with a student, because different information is needed, whether it's a student or not. And we can get into the whole conversation with FERPA, but that's very important to know. But essentially making things a lot better from the audience perspective.
Okay, love the data, right? Like data is king. And so I love that you're making decisions, positive or negative data coming in, you can then adjust accordingly. Charles or William, anything to add there?
I don't have anything.
I would also.
Go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, I would also say, the obvious thing would be the great feedback from the 5-star ratings on how insisting students and families. The main measure challenge in when students wanted to get more depth about financial aid or fin aid, every student's are case by case. In the office, we like to say what it's called, it just depends. That's our saying. So really, the challenges that we would have basically would be when students like, hey, I want to speak to a live person. I need more assistance surpass the Ivy chat. So at that moment, of course, you would have to reach out to your counselor or call in to speak to someone. But that would be like the only measured challenge I would say when it comes to lessons learned.
Very fair. Yeah. And that ties back into, you know, what we were speaking to earlier when we're thinking about quality versus quantity, right? You may have a smaller quantity of those calls coming through, but they're going to be the higher value conversations because they've already asked some questions and now they're going, well, hold on a second, I need more in-depth assistance. Is that fair? A fair
Right.
assertion?
Right.
Okay. Charles, did you have anything to share as far as successes or challenges? Or I think Falon really kind of hit the nail on the head from what I've
I
heard.
think financial aid is one of the biggest users of our systems, and they're all over the data. So I think she hit it on the head, talking in generally about how Ivy has helped us and how they look at it, how they look at the data.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I love hearing that it's data informed decision making that, you know, is getting down to like the day-to-day business plan, but also the overall kind of departmental strategy. And I know that as there are conversations, William, like you were saying, right, this kind of collaborative, learn from each other's deployments. I'd imagine there's some shared learning from those successes and challenges as well. I'll toss this one out, although it sounds like there shouldn't be any surprises here. Anything unexpected to come out of your Ivy deployment where you were like, oh, well, that's a bonus we didn't expect, or, oh, that's, you know, kind of a challenge that we didn't expect. Okay.
I would say, from the previous Ivy that we had, Ivy 1.0 versus the new transition to Ivy Quantum, I did notice a lot of the old information transferred over as well with Ivy Quantum. That was like one of the main things that I would need to pay attention to, you know, in regard to the crawl and the brain, just making sure the information is accurate. So I would then at that time manually go and change. So for example, if the bot brain already has information to like, who do I speak to regarding scholarships in particular, they would have the name there. But I realized afterwards when it became Ivy Quantum, like the same old information was there, even though this person was no longer there. So at that point, it would be my job to basically go back and make the small changes and make Ivy work for us at that point. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, using things like BrainScan and going through becomes helpful, or thinking about the generative response, which is coming dynamically from the updated content on your website versus all of those custom responses that, you know, we built out in 1.0. So that's a really great point, right? The shift to more advanced technology presented some stumbling blocks. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, just the amount of time, how much testing is important, consistently. You know, always going back and looking at even things that you thought you'd done that are simple, looking back to see, oh, what happens if I ask for this, and see what comes up. Because we found even recently, we found that something fairly simple, you know, I put in standardized testing one day just to see, okay, well, what's coming back from that? And it completely stumped the bot. And it's like, wait, how's that? I don't know if some change in the system or something happened in the scanning that the information's not there the same way anymore. But we actually, you know, had to go in and say, okay, well, we need to make sure that something is good here.
Yeah.
So consistent testing is really important.
Yeah, and I hope for you all, you know, close alignment with your partner success manager at Ivy, and then the use of the additional support resources helps to relieve some of that burden from you all, where you can kind of flag it and say like, hey, we don't understand what's going on here. Can we get some help? So when we think back to that vendor selection process, you know, part of it may be that you didn't have the perspective to think about then, but maybe it's something that you would say for our attendees to think about in their best practices. Inquire about what the support model is. Inquire about whether or not you'll have a one-to-one relationship with a customer or a partner success manager, so that when you do encounter those challenges, you know that there's someone that you can reach out to get some assistance. All right, I accidentally clicked ahead when Charles was talking, so you all got a little sneak peek at this, but no surprises here. We want to talk about, again, those best practices and looking to the future, because we're thinking about that scalability, right? that was part of the consideration process that you shared, Charles. So if you could talk to us a little bit about how you're taking those learnings, those lessons, and applying them to your future planning, if you can, or kind of like the strategy going forward for scaling.
Oh, I think that in terms of scaling, what's interesting is our scaling is coming from the other departments looking to see what we're doing and then jumping on, because some of them are not even our departments, because this started as a student affairs venture. And then especially when admissions and financial aid were part of student affairs. And now it's grown outside of that, and now we've gotten tuition billing has been interested, and other folks are interested, just again, seeing the benefits that that we've had, and also looking toward the fact that it would be ideal to have one bot throughout all of the university. I think a huge plus is the fact that even though the brains of each of these departments is separate, is different, we can link those brains. So if somebody's on the admissions page and asking a whole bunch of questions, and then one question is actually sort of a financial aid page, it doesn't say, okay, well, you got to go to the financial aid page to see this. They can ask a financial aid question or question from one of the other departments and still get that answer. And so it's actually kind of one unified experience for the students, which I think is helpful.
Yeah, especially with, it runs the gamut across every institution, whether it's decentralized, centralized, and how kind of the structure of the institution is. So I think to that point, how is the decision-making approached? Are we thinking about this just from that siloed perspective? But then the next layer becomes, and I think that this was part of the consideration, I've certainly heard it spoken about in the course of this conversation, resource availability, right? We hear a lot about, well, do I need, my entire IT team to help me stand this bot up and maintain it? How many hours is it going to take a week for us to kind of have oversight over the bot, right? Those are all really important considerations. And certainly as you think about either that initial buy-in or scaling, those are the big roadblocks that we hear about, right? Resources and budget. I don't expect you to speak to your budget. That would be unfair for me to put you on the spot about that, but certainly that resource component, because the resources that are available in financial aid, we've already heard, are different than admissions and different than other areas. Is that something that you've encountered in the conversations that you have had?
I think the challenge here is that because it's university, it's a large university, the resources come from different directions. It's not sort of one pot that pays for, things for, from athletics to admissions to academics. Everybody's budget is different and has a different amount of money, and one department can't afford to do anything, while another department can afford to have a whole bunch of live agents. The resource, well, fortunately, as you said, the IT resources for the Ivy is great, from the IT perspective, since I'm the IT guy. Once things are set up and running, folks don't really need, IT help from us a lot, because it does run itself. It runs very smoothly, which is a great thing. Again, from my perspective, and there's very good support, there's good questions, and there's a whole bunch of folks that, again, here that you can turn to if you have questions that are more about, hey, what are some of the methodologies we should use? But the challenge for us anyway, in scaling it much larger is, how to get, Peter and Paul that have different, allotments of money across the university to say, okay, well, I'll give this to, I'll give in this and I'll give in that. And, that's been our challenge right now. And so it's something that we're looking at as we move forward with scaling it up. But the thought is there are very good reasons to scale it up, and so we're trying to balance out those and to be able to help others figure out, well, it's worth jumping into this. Jump on in, the water's fine.
Well, judging by the virtual background we have going on this call, I would say the water looks very fine. But yes, I think what you're describing is a pretty common scenario. We come across it certainly, from our position often. So one last thing that I want to kind of touch on in this best practice kind of portion of the conversation, and I'll toss it to all three of you, anybody that wants to chime in. When we're thinking about AI, whether it's in a chatbot or another modality, it's obviously very rapidly evolving space. I find, that it, and this is totally self-serving, I suppose, but truthfully, for anything that you're thinking about, partnering with a vendor that has the ability and the desire to innovate and to do so in such a way that aligns with the market it's serving, so with higher education, with the needs of that market, but then also incorporates your feedback. You are the boots on the ground. We want to know what's working, what's not working for you. What are you seeing? And doesn't innovate in a vacuum. I think that would be one of the things that I would say, be mindful of that when you're approaching any software, but certainly anything in the AI space, more specifically in omni-channel communications platform. Do you all agree with that? Do you have other sort of kind of overarching recommendations that you would make to share with the group?
Well, I suppose I could start in that. I think one of the things that we have we've been chatting about, the three of us, Philon, William, and I, has been the quantum voice that you guys are coming out with. It looks, again, a lot of our departments have call centers, but still there are a lot of calls coming in, even though we have Ivy, and the thought of having calls be able to be intercepted by sort of an AI first, and then see what it can sort of triage and answer, and then our staff, or the physical staff, can then focus on the bigger, more important questions. I think is great. I don't know if you guys want to have anything to add about that.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in. I am very much excited about quantum voice. I mean, that's like my little bells and whistles. It is definitely something that I want to utilize here in the call center, and there's just so much flexibility as well as having opportunity with that system that I think any institution that utilizes that as well as the chatbot would see the improvement for their numbers all around. Just having that system serve as like a gatekeeper, essentially, to kind of make sure that your agents aren't going to get bombarded. I can see how that will impact the work environment for the agents, cause less stress for them, and ultimately, hopefully, deliver better customer service and consistency. So I really would like to implement that here with the university, but it's definitely something that I encourage everyone to, play around with, experiment with, and really consider it, because I do believe that if successfully launched and used, quantum voice would essentially act as like another employee. So we were talking about, staffing constraints, things of that nature. Anything that you can utilize that would help out your staff, whether it's small or large, I think will be beneficial to the overall operation.
Right. I would just say basically the same, what William mentioned. We're definitely looking into quantum voice. It's funny because we're actually looking into that initiative, and just out the blue, Ivy came up with this, and we're like, whoa, we're already partners with Ivy, but now that they have a different aspect where they can now do quantum voice, this is perfect. So we're looking forward to doing something like that in the future, and also help with the calls, and where they can just reach out to the number and get general information about financial aid the same way with Ivy Chat.
Love that. Would welcome quantum voice at FAU, but also, William, you said something that I love, that consistency component, right? Like, you want to be sure that whatever information your students or your end users are getting, over whatever channel is the same, right? You're kind of removing the margin of human error. So I love that you kind of highlight that. All right. Okay, team, you're about to get put on the hot seat. We've got some Q&A to make our way through. We've done a great job kind of giving the initial conversation, but let's dig into some of the specific questions that people are coming to this webinar with today. So how can I optimize my partnership with a vendor for scalability across the institution? I think that, this is really kind of asking us to land the plane. We've had this big conversation. What's at the bottom of that funnel? I feel like I should be playing like The Price is Right or something. Who wants to take this one?
I think I suppose I'll talk about that a little bit from our perspective. I think it's because that's what we're in the throes of doing, trying to figure out. I think once you can market the successes that you've had with the vendor, then the scalability hopefully should be helpful. I think it's figuring out the scalability thing is kind of a two-way street too, because you have this many players and if you have 200 departments that, just throwing out a round number, 200 departments that are available, and there are 80 that say, oh, that's perfect, I really want something like that, and then there's a whole bunch that either don't have the money or they're not really interested, or they have something else. It is a challenge. I mean, it's a great question because it's challenging. It's really tough to do it. But I think the first thing is find your successes, market them through the group, and then because the larger you scale, hopefully in the end, the less everyone pays. Or the other thing is to kind of institutionalize it. One of the directions that we're trying to head is to see if we can sort of take it off the top in the beginning, which that's a whole other discussion with a lot of other higher up people, and so that's all I'll say about that.
I love you. Just like sprinkle a little bit of that out there. And like, now it's above my pay grade.
Yeah, right.
But when you think about this optimizing, the partnership, we've talked, you just, brought Quantum Voice into the conversation. Earlier, Charles, you mentioned, I think it was you that mentioned texting. So, and then of course, we've talked about live chat. We've talked about the bot on the website. Is part of it also that in the consideration process, be thinking holistically, be looking at like, well, this suits my specific need. I need a bot on the website. But then what are the other features and functionality that are available that make this something that can work for each department? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, which is why we chose Ivy in the first place, because it has it had at the time the largest breadth of offerings that that could be taken advantage of based on the needs of that department. As I said, the texting was great. Have we gone to it? We actually haven't done a lot of texting because we have another texting vendor that our Office of IT uses, and there's a whole thing around it that so no one can really use it, although we're trying to keep our oar in there. I think there's still negotiation. I think sort of leveraging that partnership is that negotiation also of saying, hey, well, if we can add this many people, what can we do to the pricing on both sides? If we can add this many departments, where's that break that we can go, and then you can offer that break to other people. And so I think that's where we're actually we're talking a little bit more and trying to figure out how best we can use this tool across the because I think a lot of people higher up think, hey, this is a great tool. It'd be great to have it scaled far and wide and to have it be, again, a consistent thing across all departments across the university. So I think the concept is there. It's just as everything, it boils down to money. and you know, how people can pull it all together, and how people see the different benefits
Mhm.
that it will have for their department. Maybe they don't need a chatbot, but maybe they do need, you know, more of the live agent thing. And we have some things, we have something that that actually our Office of IT for the university offers that's free, but it doesn't work that well. So again, this is again why we like Ivy.
When you mentioned that, you know, IT is using a texting vendor, and when we also think about, you know, you mentioned Peter and Paul earlier, we're going to talk about robbing Peter to pay Paul. You know, there's a thought about the disparate systems being used across campus, not even getting as far as like having one unified bot across campus, right? But like, this office is using this texting vendor, this one's using this. Hey, we're spending money on a CRM and an SIS, and how can we pull some of those systems together so that we're not using different ones, we're getting max value out of one, but B, the SIS, the CRM, like the ITSM, how do we get the most value out of those? So then that integration capability, I think, also is something to consider when you're thinking about the scalability, right? How can it support the different use cases of each department by offering that highly personalized experience? Or, you know, if we're thinking about admissions, feeding that, you know, that enrollment funnel and that lead capture, you know, whatever it is. So I know we're kind of getting really into the granular stuff, but when you mentioned that IT texting component, it really kind of sparked that thought for me.
Well, you know, the one thing that that this conversation's having for me is what it really needs on the university side is sort of an ombudsman, you know, somebody who's going to go into each of these departments and say, oh, here's how do you use what you have, and then see how this could, I mean, if we truly believe that it's better to have one tool around the university, have someone who's sort of working toward that end. But it's like a hands-on, you know, hey, look, what do you have? What do you do with that? Here, let me show you how this could work in place of that. You know, and see how we can customize things, because it could be that, again, depending on how we could also work with the vendor to figure out, well, maybe if this this department needs this functionality but doesn't need that one, maybe we can work with the vendor to say, well, let's figure out a pricing structure so that not everybody is paying for all of these different functionalities. Maybe we can cut and slice here and there, but I think it really needs someone who's going to take it, you know, it's going to take the mantle up and market across the campus so that everyone can see that that it'd be useful for them from their perspective.
That is a fantastic point. So I think that might be like, you know, kind of the crux of this in terms of optimizing. It's that hub and spoke approach. Who's going to be the hub of this and champion it across the institution to pull together the disparate use cases? And yeah, okay, I love that. Let's come up for air. I'll take Charles off the hot seat. So how do you create partnerships internally when the institution is historically conservative regarding information sharing? So this is a good one, because we know that data privacy is a concern, right? That we've talked about that decentralization. So I saw some eyebrows go up when this question came up. Who wants to jump in on this one? Charles, I feel like you're biting your tongue.
Well, I'm trying to figure to some extent figure it out. Institutions historically conservative regarding information sharing. So so the departments, I'm just trying to figure out how the base comes that way. So everyone is so competitive that they don't share experiences, and they don't share you know, well, again, successes and failures and thoughts.
Yeah.
And so it's really starting that. It's really saying, hey, folks, you know, we should, you know, we should talk. That's because it sounds like more of a cultural thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it doesn't sound like this is anything that you've truly encountered, the three of you, in your tenure at FAU, that you found it to be more collaborative and more collegial, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Definitely. I would say that because that's what we've been doing in the past, basically reaching out to different departments, reaching out to admissions, the FAU, mostly the campus, knowing that financial aid is one of the forefront departments that are trying Ivy. So we do come reach out to each other, ask questions, set up a meeting like, hey, how does it work? Or what can we do? Or do we share brains and share information about our different departments to be able to assist students productively. So, I mean, I think we already do that. It's just really, I guess, pulling the plug to make that happen. Like Charles would say, the higher ups, or yeah.
Do you think that that's part of, like, the culturally part of the DNA at FAU, that it is just historically very collaborative and everybody's invested in the overall success?
Yes, exactly, for sure.
I just want to add in just from my experience. So with working with the other departments within the university, it was a little bit of a challenge trying to learn everything. But I believe it was Charles who said it earlier, where I believe it's important to have someone that's going to be able to spearhead this system for your department, and then you can work hand in hand with other people to be able to kind of sort of make sure that your stories align and to again deliver that consistency and that consistent messaging and branding. So at least from my my perspective, I've been able to kind of just go right to people, be like, hey, how does this work? How do you utilize this tool? And then when I get that feedback, it makes a light click for me. And I'm like, okay, now I see how we're able to make sure that we're having a partnership. So if they're getting this type of call volume in another area, how can my department help to lower that call volume or alleviate some of the stress from them? Anything that we could do, it's all a team effort, you know?
So what I'm hearing you say is it takes curiosity and the willingness to ask, right? You just have the expectation of the information being served up all the time, right? You've got to, so it is definitely a two-way street. Okay.
And the willingness to offer from the beginning, I think, too, to say, hey, you know what? We've had this really good luck with this. Would you be interested in, I mean, just sort of putting out that olive branch first, hopefully it plants the seed to kind of changing the environment somewhat, at least starting to form some friends and around the table.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add on to that, we really just had this conversation just yesterday with William and Charles discussing, like, yeah, because he uses, basically his department uses Ivy differently from what we use it. We are prone to do on live chats where it's secondary in his department, and advising that, you can make changes with filters, different settings that can be beneficial to your department. And also advising that not only we are available here, or if you have any questions that we can set up meetings, Ivy support is available as well. They're there and can assist any kind of way possible. If you have any questions or something that's not going right, Ivy support team usually does respond pretty quickly. So yeah, just basically sharing the information with everybody.
Love it. Thank you. Okay, let me check time. Okay, we are at time, so you guys are off the hook. We'll follow up with everybody who registered. We'll send responses. We'll summarize these questions in response, and then any additional questions that were served up in the chat. I want to thank Charles, Falon, and William for joining us. I know you all appreciate them being here as well. They really brought some great insights to the conversation, a lot of context and boots on the ground. So thank you, attendees, for joining us today. Happy holidays to everyone. I would encourage you to take a moment and scan those QR codes so that you have access to those two documents, which really kind of contribute to the conversation across departments on campus, but then also for your specific area, how should you approach the consideration of implementing an AI chatbot? So thank you all. Happy holidays. Be safe. And we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Bye.